We live in an age overflowing with everything: information, technology, comfort, noise, and yet we have never been more terrified of nothing. We fill every second with sound, every silence with distraction, every pause with scrolling. We've built machines that can simulate thought, predict weather, and recreate voices of the dead, yet we can't stand the sound of an unanswered moment. It's as if humanity has declared war on emptiness. But here's the cosmic irony. Everything you've ever known, every atom, every star, every idea emerged from nothing. Not poetic nothing, not symbolic nothing, actual, physical, scientific, measurable nothing. At least that's what we used to call it, until physics discovered that nothing might be the most something thing in existence. Once nothing was a simple word, a blank page, an empty room, a quiet mind. In science, it was the vacuum absence, void, the ultimate zero. But as we learned to look deeper into the structure of reality, we discovered that even nothing refuses to be nothing. Between the stars, where you'd think there is emptiness, there is structure. Quantum fields vibrating, virtual particles blinking in and out of existence faster than any clock can tick. A vacuum, it turns out, seethes with potential energy. Space itself boils. What we call nothing is actually the restless stage upon which everything happens. So maybe it's not nothingness we're afraid of, it's truth. Because if the void is alive, then emptiness isn't absence, it's origin. Let me tell you how we found that out. In the early 20th century, physics was divided by two great revolutions. Einstein revealed that space and time are not the background of the universe, they are the fabric of it. Then came quantum mechanics, whispering that this fabric trembles with uncertainty, that even in perfect stillness, particles pop in and out of existence. For decades, scientists tried to reconcile those two pictures, relativity's smooth space-time and quantum theory's jittering chaos. And right there, at that intersection, they found something astonishing. The vacuum, the emptiest possible state, isn't empty at all. Think of it like this. Even when you remove all matter, all light, all radiation, all energy, space still has a residual hum, a background whisper. It's called vacuum energy, and it's not metaphorical. We've measured it. It's what drives the expansion of the universe, what cosmologists call dark energy. That silent, invisible push that stretches space itself faster and faster every second. In other words, the fate of the cosmos depends not on what exists, but on what doesn't. The nothingness between galaxies is literally tearing them apart. You can see why that unsettles us. We've built our entire psychology on the assumption that something is more important than nothing. That being is superior to non-being. That silence is just the absence of sound, not a sound in its own right. But the universe doesn't share that bias. It's democratic. It gives equal weight to presence and absence, to mass and void, to matter and antimatter. The two balance each other like opposite notes in a cosmic chord. One cannot exist without the other. So perhaps the first forgotten law of nothingness is this: nothing is not the opposite of everything. It is its partner. Yet, for all our scientific triumphs, we've forgotten how to live with emptiness. In ancient cultures, emptiness wasn't feared, it was revered. In Taoist philosophy, wu-wei meant non-doing, the art of stillness as strength. In Buddhism, shunyata, emptiness, was not void, but fullness beyond definition. Even in Western thought, thinkers like Pascal and Descartes stared into the void, not as nihilists, but as explorers of the unknown. But somewhere along the way, as engines roared and factories filled, we learned to fill the silence instead of listening to it. Now, our cities hum 24 hours a day. Our minds hum even louder. We have become allergic to pause, and yet the universe itself operates on pause. Stars live and die in cycles of explosion and silence. Galaxies rotate through eons of motion and stillness. Even atoms vibrate between presence and absence, flipping states in quantum uncertainty. It's as though the cosmos itself breathes in and out, expansion and collapse, creation and quiet. Maybe what we call nothing is simply the inhale between every cosmic exhale, If so, then our obsession with constant motion isn't just cultural, it's unnatural. We're trying to outpace the very rhythm of reality. Let's imagine what nothing actually looks like. Close your eyes. Remove the stars. Erase the atoms. Dissolve the photons. Flatten the waves of space and time. You might think there would be blackness, a void. But that's still something. Even darkness requires space to exist in. True nothingness would have no dimension, no duration, no rules, no you to imagine it. And right there, we hit the limit of comprehension. Because the human mind, built to count, to compare, to label, cannot truly grasp the absence of everything. We can describe infinity, but we can't feel it. We can imagine chaos, but not nothing. That's why the physics of nothingness is not just a scientific question, it's a philosophical mirror. It forces us to confront the boundaries of perception. The way we mistake absence for loss, silence for failure, nothing for something broken. In reality, nothingness is the baseline from which existence emerges again and again. It's not the enemy of being, it's the womb of it. In the same way that silence gives music shape, that pause gives thought clarity, that darkness reveals the stars, nothingness gives meaning to everything. You can see it in art. The negative space between brushstrokes, the silence between symphonies, the pause between breaths in a performance. It's not absence, it's intention. You can see it in nature. The empty spaces in a spider's web are what make it functional. The gaps in the forest canopy allow light to reach the soil. Even the hollow bones of a bird are what make it capable of flight. The universe has always known the secret we've forgotten. Nothingness is not waste, it's design. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of modern life is that we've lost touch with that design. We build, consume, accelerate, believing that fullness is the same as purpose. We fill the sky with satellites and the mind with noise, and then wonder why we can't hear the pulse of meaning anymore. But the physics of nothingness whispers another truth. Stillness isn't stagnation, it's structure. Emptiness isn't absence, it's opportunity. Even the Big Bang itself was born from the quantum fluctuation of nothing, an invisible tremor in the void, amplified into galaxies, planets, and people. The most important event in the history of existence came from a place with no space, no time, no things. Everything you are, everything you love, was once nothing. So when you find yourself lost, or lonely, or uncertain, remember that even the universe began that way. It started from emptiness, and look what it made of itself. Perhaps that's what we are called to do as well. Not to fear the void, but to transform it. Not to run from nothingness, but to remember its creative power. Because the forgotten physics of nothingness is not just about the birth of the universe. It's about the rebirth of awareness. To the ancient Greeks, nothing was terrifying. Aristotle insisted that nature abhors a vacuum. He meant it literally. He believed emptiness could not exist. If you removed all matter from a space, the universe would rush to fill it, as if existence itself feared the dark. This wasn't just philosophy, it was theology. For the Greeks, the cosmos was perfect, continuous, complete. A gap in that perfection meant imperfection, a flaw in the divine geometry. So, for nearly 2,000 years, Western science agreed. There could be no void. Every corner of the universe, every nook of space, must be filled with something, even if that something was invisible. Then came the Renaissance, and with it, a dangerous new idea. Maybe the heavens were not full of crystalline spheres or divine substance, but simply space. In the 17th century, Isaac Newton gave that idea form. To him, the universe was an infinite stage, an empty arena in which matter danced, according to precise laws. Space and time were absolute, eternal, and indifferent. Objects moved, collided, and orbited within this vast, silent void. For the first time, emptiness had become respectable, a legitimate concept, measurable, and mathematical. It was no longer something to fear, but something to use. And from that vacuum, modern physics was born. Newton's universe was orderly and predictable. If you knew the position and motion of every particle, you could, in theory, predict the future and retrodict the past. No gods, no case, just mechanics. It was a comforting picture, a cosmos without surprises. But it was also sterile, because in Newton's universe, space was a stage that never changed, a backdrop that existed whether or not anyone was watching. Nothingness had become emptiness again, useful, but soulless. And that's when the next revolution arrived to ruin the calm. Einstein shattered Newton's serene emptiness. He showed that space and time are not containers, but participants. They stretch, bend, and ripple in response to mass and energy. Gravity, he said, isn't a force pulling things through space, it's the warping of space itself. Matter tells space-time how to curve, space-time tells matter how to move. Suddenly, the void was alive again. No longer static, no longer indifferent, dynamic, elastic, reactive. Einstein had turned nothing into something. Then came the 20th century's second great upheaval, quantum mechanics. Physicists looking inside atoms discovered that emptiness is anything but empty. Even in a vacuum, the nothing buzzes with activity. Particles appear and vanish in pairs, matter and antimatter, like fleeting thoughts in the mind of the universe. They borrow energy from the void, exist for a blink, then repay the debt by annihilating each other. This isn't metaphor. It's measurable. The Casimir effect, two metal plates brought close together in a vacuum experience an attractive force. Not because of air pressure or magnetism, but because the energy of nothing between them is lower than the energy of nothing outside them. Nothing has pressure. Nothing has energy. Nothing, it seems, has structure. In 1998, astronomers studying distant supernovae discovered that the universe's expansion is accelerating. Galaxies are not slowing down, as gravity would predict they're speeding up, as if pushed by an unseen hand. That hand turned out to be the vacuum itself. Empty space, it turns out, carries energy, a tiny, relentless pressure that drives everything apart. We call it dark energy. It makes up roughly 70% of the cosmos. Let that sink in. Most of the universe is not made of stars or atoms or even dark matter. It's made of the energy of emptiness. Nothing rules everything. Every time we thought we understood the void, it humbled us. First, we feared it. Then we used it. Then we discovered it was using us. It's as if the universe keeps whispering, stop underestimating nothing. Because nothingness is not absence, it's architecture. It is the scaffolding of existence, the silent engineer of the cosmos. Without it, there would be no motion, no gravity, no light. Even consciousness, that most intimate phenomenon, depends on pauses, the gaps between thoughts, the stillness between sensations. Without silence, sound is noise. Without emptiness, experience collapses into chaos. And yet, in our daily lives, we treat nothingness like a threat. We rush to fill silence with chatter, to fill space with clutter, to fill time with distraction. We confuse activity with significance. But maybe the ancient philosophers were right in their own way. Maybe nature does abhor a vacuum, and so do we, because we see our own reflection in it. To face emptiness is to face ourselves stripped of labels and motion, to meet the raw awareness that underlies everything. That's uncomfortable, but it's also honest. And honesty, like the vacuum, has power. At the cosmic level, the vacuum is the ultimate engine of creation. At the human level, emptiness can be the same. Every invention, every work of art, every act of compassion begins as a gap, a space where something is missing. The absence of comfort births empathy. The absence of understanding births science. The absence of meaning births philosophy. Nothingness, properly seen, is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of imagination. In quantum theory, the vacuum isn't just a field of random fluctuations. It's a field of possibility. Given enough time and the right nudge, those fluctuations can bloom into matter, into stars, into life. That's how our universe may have begun a tiny patch of nothing that became something because nothing itself is unstable. The void cannot stay void. It longs to become. Maybe we do too. Maybe that's why we create, why we reach, why we dream. because the same physics that governs the vacuum governs our hearts. We are made of restless nothing trying to understand itself. We've spent centuries trying to fill the universe. Now we spend our lives trying to fill ourselves. Every notification, every purchase, every new distraction is our modern attempt to banish the empty. But the void doesn't vanish when we ignore it. It waits, quietly, patiently. It's there when the phone screen goes dark. It's there when the applause ends. It's there in the pause between heartbeats when we realize that busyness is not the same as purpose. And maybe, just maybe, the universe designed it that way to remind us that meaning cannot exist without space to hold it. There's a strange phenomenon in psychology. When people are asked to sit in silence for 15 minutes with nothing to do, most choose to shock themselves rather than face their own thoughts. That's not a flaw in character. That's a symptom of an age that equates silence with boredom and solitude with failure. But the physics of nothingness says otherwise. In quantum fields, silence is possibility. In human life, silence is potential. When nothing happens, everything can. Every discovery begins in that stillness, the unoccupied moment before thought, before invention, before the leap. It's the pause where chaos rearranges itself into clarity. And yet, we run from it as if our own thoughts were predators. Entire industries depend on our discomfort with emptiness. Advertising, social media, entertainment, they all whisper the same message: don't stop, don't sit, don't listen to the quiet. Because in the quiet, you might remember who you are, and that, to a marketplace built on distraction, is dangerous. Noise is profitable. Silence is revolutionary. The physics of the vacuum applies here too. Energy fills the available space. So if you leave no room for rest, chaos will fill it instead. Our attention is like a field. If we saturate it with noise, the signal disappears. To recover meaning, we must reintroduce emptiness. Ask any artist, scientist, or thinker where their best ideas come from, and they'll describe a kind of nothingness. A walk without music, a shower without agenda, a blank page that stares back until something in the silence begins to hum. That hum, that spark, is the same restless energy that gave birth to the universe. Because creativity is not the act of filling space, it's the art of listening to it. The mind, like the cosmos, thrives on fluctuation, a balance between action and pause, between signal and void. In that space of nothingness, the impossible becomes possible. Every spiritual tradition has its own language for this. In meditation, it's emptiness. In prayer, it's stillness. In philosophy, it's contemplation. They're all attempts to do something deeply scientific, to observe the observer. When you quiet the noise, you begin to sense that awareness itself, the you behind the thoughts, is not an object in the universe, but a property of it. Like gravity, it binds things together. Like space, it holds everything that arises. And when that realization dawns, the boundary between you and nothing blurs. You begin to see that the emptiness you fear is not alien, it's home. Here's a secret hidden in plain sight. The human heart obeys the same equations as the cosmos. Loss feels like gravity, it pulls inward, it collapses us into ourselves. Grief is an emotional black hole, dense with memory and meaning. But even there, light escapes a lesson learned, a kindness remembered, a promise made to keep living. Every heartbreak teaches us the same principle the stars know. Collapse is not the end. It's how new worlds begin. We are made of remnants, of exploded suns and broken experiences rearranged into something that can love again. If physics has a poetry, that's it. Society tells us to chase fullness, full schedules, full wallets, full lives. But look at nature. Every system that endures does so by balancing fullness with emptiness. A lung works because it empties. A heart beats because it pauses. A mind thinks because it forgets. Fullness without emptiness is suffocation. Motion without rest is collapse. So the next time you catch yourself measuring life by accumulation, remember, the most powerful forces in the universe are invisible, and the most essential parts of life, air, space, silence, rest, are the ones we never see. If we ever hope to evolve morally as a species, we'll have to relearn the physics of restraint. Because power without pause becomes tyranny. Ambition without reflection becomes ruin. The vacuum between actions, that moment of consideration, is what makes civilization possible. In that pause, empathy is born. The capacity to imagine someone else's experience requires space inside you where their reality can fit. Without that space, without that nothingness, all that remains is reaction. And reaction, scaled up to billions of people, is chaos. Maybe the universe has been modeling this for us all along. Every star, every galaxy, every atom lives in relationship with emptiness. The space between gives structure to the whole. If there were no void between atoms, matter couldn't exist. If there were no gaps between galaxies, gravity would crush them. If there were no stillness in your mind, thought would blur into static. Nothingness is the architecture of harmony. But we forgot. We mistook silence for absence, and absence for failure. And in doing so, we lost the thread that connects physics to philosophy, science to soul. To remember nothingness is not to retreat from the world. It's to re-enter it consciously. To work, create, love, and build, but to leave room for wonder. To speak, but also to listen. To live fully, but not frantically. The universe has spent 8 billion years refining this balance. Expansion and stillness, matter and void, energy and rest. We're not separate from that pattern. We are that pattern. And maybe the next great revolution in human thought won't come from another equation or discovery, but from the rediscovery of quiet, the physics of nothingness, remembered as the practice of awareness. History has never really moved in straight lines. It moves in pauses, in the spaces between what we build and what we understand. Every revolution, every discovery, every leap forward in civilization has been born not just from action, but from emptiness, from the quiet gaps where imagination could breathe. We celebrate the sparks, but we forget the silence that allowed them to form. Think about the great turning points of human history. The Renaissance was born not in a blaze of invention, but after a long stretch of darkness and plague when Europe had been emptied of certainty, forced to sit with its own mortality. The Enlightenment came after centuries of superstition and religious control, when thinkers finally asked, "What if we don't know?" and dared to wait for an answer. Even the space race, that ultimate display of motion, began in stillness the moment a generation looked up after the devastation of war and saw possibility in the void above. Every great advance has a vacuum before it, a nothing that invites creation. Nature, it seems, the species stasis boradores balance. When a system becomes too full, too dense, too sure of itself, it collapses like a star that can no longer sustain fusion. And yet, that collapse is not failure, it's renewal. Supernovae seed galaxies, extinction reset ecosystems. Pauses reinvent thought. Human progress follows the same law. We fill our minds and our cities until they can't hold anymore, then everything slows, cracks, empties, and from that clearing, new ideas emerge. Emptiness is not a lack of motion, it's the prerequisite for direction. Take Isaac Newton again. During the Great Plague of 1665, Cambridge University shut down, students scattered. Newton retreated to his family home in the countryside, a forced stillness, months of isolation. He could have seen it as wasted time. Instead, in that nothingness, he found everything. He formulated the laws of motion, gravity, and optics, the foundations of modern science. The world calls it the Year of Wonders. But really, it was a year of silence. That's the forgotten physics of progress. Pressure gives us energy, but emptiness gives us vision. Today, we've inverted that law. We treat motion as meaning, noise as knowledge. We believe that acceleration equals advancement. But physics and history say otherwise. Even galaxies have rest frames. Even light, which travels at the cosmic speed limit, measures its motion relative to something. Pure motion without relation is chaos. If everything moves, nothing can be compared. And without comparison, understanding collapses. So the more we accelerate, the more we risk forgetting what we're moving toward. That's why our age of abundance often feels like a void. We're full of everything but purpose. The vacuum doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It waits eternally patient for disturbance, for the smallest fluctuation that might trigger new creation. That's what gives it power. The universe was born from a quantum tremor in that waiting, an infinitesimal imbalance, amplified by time. If we understood that lesson, maybe we'd build differently, not always chasing expansion, but tending to the spaces in between. Because the true progress of civilization isn't in the next invention. It's in learning when to stop, listen, and let the field reset. In biology, rest is not idleness, it's regulation. A heartbeat's pause prevents fibrillation. A neuron's refractory period prevents chaos in the brain. A planet's winter allows life to renew. Nothingness in every system is the interval that preserves coherence. The same must be true for humanity. Without stillness, we forget how to synchronize. Without pause, we forget how to think. If we want a sustainable future, we have to recover the physics of intervals, the science of stopping. Civilization right now is between eras, the industrial age ending, the digital one not yet mature. We call it uncertainty. The universe might call it symmetry breaking. When a system cools, new structures emerge, crystals form, order appears. Maybe humanity is cooling too. Maybe our frantic expansion has reached its limit, and we're entering the pause before a more coherent phase. That's not decline, it's transformation. We're learning, perhaps reluctantly, that progress isn't about filling every void with technology, but learning to inhabit the void wisely. The irony of all this is that the greatest inventions are often those that remove rather than add. The printing press removed gatekeepers. Democracy removed king. Science removed superstition. And each time, we panicked afraid of the emptiness left behind until we discovered that freedom lives in the spaces cleared of control. Progress, it seems, is subtraction with intent, a return to simplicity that reveals new complexity. That's what the vacuum does on a cosmic scale. It doesn't just permit creation, it makes room for it. The same physics that governs matter also governs morality. If you pack too much certainty into a belief, it collapses into fanaticism. If you leave no room for doubt, you've left no room for growth. Every moral system needs vacuum space for questioning, for revision, for empathy. That's why science works. It institutionalizes humility. It keeps emptiness at its core. A theory is never complete. A model is never final. The scientific method is, in a sense, the worship of nothing, the disciplined acknowledgement that there is always more to learn. Imagine if politics or religion or personal relationships operated by the same law. But here's the warning written into this physics. A system that refuses to pause eventually collapses under its own gravity. A star that fuses too fast dies young. A civilization that grows too quickly exhausts its resources. A person who never rests burns out. The black hole is not just an astronomical object, it's a metaphor for imbalance. Too much energy compressed into too small a space. Too much certainty, too little openness. That's where we are now, flirting with our own event horizon of attention, meaning, and sustainability. And the only escape velocity is awareness. When astronomers discovered that the universe's expansion is accelerating, it was unsettling. It meant that space itself was stretching, driven by an unseen force. But what if that same principle applies internally? Maybe awareness, too, is accelerating. Maybe our discomfort, the feeling of overstimulation, the chaos of change, is not the end, but the stretching of consciousness toward a new scale. We are, after all, the universe becoming aware of its own expansion. The question is whether we can expand responsibly with grace, with balance, with respect for the silence that sustains us, because even cosmic inflation needed a period of cooling to form galaxies. If awareness expands forever without rest, it remains vapor potential without form. So, what does it mean to remember the physics of nothingness? It means to restore the rhythm of the universe in our own lives, the pulse of creation and rest, fullness and emptiness. To remember that the spaces between are not absences but opportunities. That silence is not the death of thought, but its birthplace. Maybe the future will belong not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who can listen longest. Because in a universe ruled by nothing, attention is the rarest form of matter. There's a rhythm hidden beneath everything. The stars expand and contract, galaxies drift apart and coalesce, planets orbit in tides of light and shadow. Even the universe itself seems to inhale and exhale, energy released, energy reclaimed. It's as though existence itself breathes. This is not metaphor. It's physics written as poetry. The cosmos is the largest living system we know, and nothingness is its pulse. When the Big Bang happened, it wasn't an explosion in space. It was an explosion of space. From a singular infinitesimal point, the universe expanded faster than light, stretching the very fabric of space-time. That was the first exhale. Since then, the cosmos has continued to expand, cooling and thinning, allowing complexity to form, atoms, stars, galaxies, minds. And yet, every exhalation implies a future inhale. Gravity pulls against expansion. Entropy meets emergence. There's a slow rhythm written into the architecture of existence, a pendulum between being and nothingness. If expansion is the universe breathing out, consciousness might be its way of breathing in a gathering of awareness before the next creation. Our lives follow the same rhythm. Every breath we take mirrors that cosmic motion. Inhale order, exhale release. Inhale potential, exhale transformation. It's no coincidence that all living things rely on this oscillation. Even cells pulse with electrical rhythms. Even the brain cycles between waves of rest and activity. We live because we oscillate between nothing and something, between the stillness of the void and the fullness of experience. But when we forget to pause, when we hold our collective breath in endless striving, we lose sync with the universe that made us. Astrophysics teaches us a strange lesson. Collapse and creation are not opposites. They're partners in an endless waltz. When a massive star runs out of fuel, it collapses under its own gravity. But that implosion creates the conditions for rebirth, a supernova that spreads heavy elements across space, seeding new stars, new worlds, new chances for life. Without collapse, there would be no us. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the oxygen you breathe, all were forged in stellar death. The universe destroys itself beautifully. And if destruction can carry that much creativity, maybe we can learn to trust our own endings too. Humanity too breathes in cycles. We rise, innovate, expand, then pause, doubt, rebuild. The Renaissance was an inhale after the Dark Ages. The Enlightenment was an exhale of old superstition. The Space Age was another deep breath, our species testing its lungs on the cosmic shore. Now, again, we are between breaths. Technology has given us power once reserved for gods. We can edit DNA, manipulate weather, and see the birth of galaxies. But awareness hasn't kept pace with ability. We have exhaled our inventions faster than we can inhale their implications. That imbalance, that spiritual hypoxia, is why the modern world feels so breathless. In physics, balance is everything. For every force, there is an equal and opposite one. For every expansion, there must be contraction. But in our civilization, we've mistaken expansion for progress. We measure growth in data, in GDP, in distance traveled, never in depth of understanding. We know how to send machines to Mars, but we rarely stop to ask why we're restless on Earth. We know how to accelerate particles to near light speed, but not how to slow a mind long enough to feel the miracle of being. That's the forgotten inhale, the pause, that would let us understand what our exhale has created. When you breathe deeply, there's a moment between inhale and exhale, a tiny stillness where the body neither takes nor releases. That moment is balance. The same applies to civilizations. When societies forget to rest, they overheat. When economies never contract, they burst. When empires never stop expanding, they implode. And when a mind never pauses, it forgets how to think. We often describe burnout as exhaustion, but it's really suffocation, the inability to let awareness catch up to action. The solution isn't more energy, it's more emptiness. Quantum physics tells us the vacuum is the source of all fluctuations, but also the sink that absorbs them. It's both cradle and grave. Awareness works the same way. When you meditate, dream, or simply sit in silence, your mind returns to its vacuum state, the base energy from which creativity, empathy, and understanding arise. That's not laziness, it's maintenance. It's how consciousness recharges its field. Imagine if whole cultures learned to value that internal vacuum, if we built time into our systems not just for efficiency, but for emptiness. We might rediscover the art of meaning. Astronomers once thought the universe would expand forever until it thinned into a cold, dark nothing. Now, some theories suggest it might one day slow, stop, and collapse again, a big crunch. And maybe that cycle has happened before, countless times. Expansion, collapse, rebirth, en éternel breath. If that's true, then nothingness isn't the opposite of life, it's its pulse. It's the space between heartbeats. On a universal scale, every end contains the rhythm of a beginning. What if morality itself follows the same cosmic breath? Compassion, after all, is the act of making space for another within yourself, an inhale of empathy before the exhale of action. Justice requiert pause before judgment. Wisdom requires silence before speech. In physics, resonance happens when systems vibrate together in harmony. In life, it happens when awareness synchronizes with compassion. When enough people find that rhythm, the inhale of understanding, the exhale of service society begins to resonate at a higher frequency. That's not mysticism, that's coherence. Each time we make peace with nothingness, our field of awareness expands. We see further, feel deeper, think longer, and the boundaries between self and universe start to blur. The atoms in your body, the photons that strike your eyes, the thoughts that spark in your brain, all are fluctuations of the same underlying field. You are not in the universe. You are of it. You are not a visitor in space. You are space becoming conscious. The breath of the cosmos passes through you with every moment of awareness. When stars die, they return their material to the void. When you die, your atoms will do the same. And someday, the universe will exhale you into another form. New clouds, new suns, new eyes to see. Nothingness will remember you, because nothingness forgets nothing. It stores potential the way a seed stores spring. So breathe deeply. Each breath is borrowed starlight, recycled through billions of years. Each pause is the echo of the Big Bang's first stillness. The universe is not somewhere out there. It's in the rise and fall of your chest. There's a line in the universe beyond which light cannot return. Astronomers call it an event horizon, the edge of a black hole, the boundary where gravity overwhelms escape. But the more I think about it, the more I realize humanity has its own horizons too. Moments when our knowledge bends faster than our wisdom, moments when our reach outpaces our reflection, moments when we drift so far from silence that we forget what it sounds like. And yet, it's always at those edges, at the threshold between everything and nothing, that we rediscover what it means to be alive. In 1967, the physicist John Archibald Wheeler coined the term black hole. Before that, astronomers didn't even have a name for these cosmic abysses. They called them frozen stars. And Wheeler, with the poetic intuition of a scientist who saw more than equations, gave the darkness a name. That's what awareness does. It gives names to nothing. It draws a boundary, not to confine mystery, but to notice it. Because naming is not possession, it's participation. When you can describe something, you've joined its story. The same is true for us. Each time we name our fears, our griefs, our mistakes, we make them part of the narrative instead of the void. Awareness is the event horizon of the soul, the point where avoidance becomes understanding. There was a time when our greatest ambition was to touch the moon. When Neil Armstrong stepped onto that powder gray surface, he said it was a small step for man, but a giant leap for mankind. We tend to remember the leap, but we forget the silence that followed. After Apollo 11, the world stood still. Televisions flickered across the planet, united for one quiet moment by awe. That's what progress feels like when it's pure, not noise, not triumphalism, but reverence. Because even our greatest motion is dwarfed by the vastness that surrounds it. In that silence, humanity glimpsed itself from above, fragile, improbable, glowing with borrowed light. For a moment, we understood that the opposite of nothing isn't everything. It's connection. Carl Sagan once said that we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. That single idea changes everything. Because if that's true, then awareness is not a luxury, it's a cosmic imperative. The universe, vast and ancient, has produced countless stars, but only one species, so far as we know, that can reflect on their beauty. That makes consciousness the rarest substance in existence. And like all rare things, it's fragile. If awareness disappears, the universe goes dark again. Not in matter, but in meaning. We are the light that reveals its structure. We are the question the universe asks itself in human form. To forget that is to drift beyond our own horizon. The deeper our understanding grows, the more our responsibility expands. Every telescope, every microscope, every particle accelerator extends our sight, but also our reach. And reach without reflection is peril. The same curiosity that splits atoms can also split humanity. The same algorithms that connect us can confine us in echo chambers. The same spacefaring dream that lifts our eyes upward can blind us to the fragile world beneath our feet. Awareness without compassion becomes entropy. Knowledge without humility becomes collapse. But when understanding meets empathy, when science remembers silence, creation finds balance again. Maybe we've been reading the story backward. We think the goal is to conquer the stars, to fill the void, but perhaps the real journey is inward, to explore the space of awareness itself. The black hole teaches us that boundaries are not prisons. They're mirrors. Everything that crosses the horizon is transformed, not lost. And maybe, just maybe, the same is true for us. When civilizations fall, they don't vanish. They become the soil for new ideas. When people die, they don't end. They dissolve into memory, into the atoms that shape future lives. When awareness fades, it doesn't disappear. It returns to the field from which it came, waiting for another chance to look back at the stars. There's an image that always moves me. The photograph of Earth taken from the Voyager 1 spacecraft in 1990. From a distance of 6 billion kilometers, our planet is a single pixel, a pale blue dot, suspended in the vast dark. Sagan called it a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. All our wars, our triumphs, our heartbreaks contained in a single glimmer. From that perspective, ego collapses, and what remains is reverence. That's what nothingness teaches when you finally listen to it. Perspective. The void doesn't diminish us. It calibrates us. It reminds us that significance isn't measured by scale, but by awareness. And maybe the most sacred act a conscious being can perform is not to dominate the cosmos, but to appreciate it. Some scientists now speculate that black holes might give birth to new universes, that beyond the event horizon lies another cosmos, expanding from the ashes of the one before it. If that's true, then even the ultimate collapse hides creation. Even total darkness contains dawn. And maybe that's the final law of nothingness, that what we call endings are simply horizons points where perspective fails, but process continues. The universe never truly ends. It only transforms its silence. So perhaps when we face our own global challenges, climate change, division, existential risk, we are approaching a kind of social event horizon. But just like the cosmos, what happens next depends on how we handle the void. Do we collapse inward under our own weight, or do we transform into something new? There's a saying in physics, information is never lost. Even if it falls into a black hole, it's somehow encoded in the faint radiation that escapes, stretched, distorted, but preserved. Maybe that's true for consciousness as well. Maybe nothing that has ever been truly known or loved or created is wasted. Maybe it all lingers, encoded in the field of awareness that binds the universe together. If so, then your life, every act of kindness, every moment of understanding ripples forever through the vacuum. You are not a temporary flare in the dark. You are part of the universe's memory of itself. So what then is the final horizon? It isn't death. It isn't distance. It isn't even the heat death of the cosmos. The final horizon is forgetfulness, the loss of awareness. And that's the one fate we can resist. Because as long as there is curiosity, as long as there is wonder, as long as there is a single mind willing to look into the void and say, "Show me who I am," the universe will never truly go dark. That's the true forgotten physics of nothingness. Nothingness isn't an end. It's a beginning waiting for attention. And in that attention, in that act of seeing the cosmos, remembers itself again. At the end of every story, there is a pause, not an ending. A quiet, a moment when the echoes fade and the listener exhales. That pause is not absence. It is grace. Because silence is what gives meaning to sound. And nothingness, the great eternal nothingness, is what gives meaning to everything. We began by fearing the void. We filled it with gods, with data, with noise. We tried to conquer it, contain it, explain it. But now, standing at the edge of understanding, we see that the void was never our enemy. It was our reflection. It was the universe waiting for us to notice. Maybe that's what all of this has been about. The 13.8 billion year journey from the first spark to the first thought. Hydrogen learned to feel. Starlight learned to ask questions. And somewhere in that long silence, awareness awoke and said, "I am." That was the moment nothing became everything. When you look up tonight, try to feel the quiet between the stars. That's not emptiness, that's possibility. That's the original canvas, still stretching, still humming, still asking. And you, with your questions, your fears, your fleeting heartbeat, you are part of its answer. Every breath you take is a continuation of the first expansion. Every act of kindness is a counterforce to entropy. Every bit of understanding is light escaping gravity. You don't have to fill the void. You only have to notice it and let it teach you. So when this voice fades, don't rush to replace it. Let the silence linger. Let it feel uncomfortable, then essential. Because in that silence, the universe listens back. And maybe, if you listen closely enough, you'll hear what it's been saying since the beginning. Out of nothing, I became. And through you, I remember that is the forgotten physics of nothingness. The discovery that the universe does not end in silence. It is silence, forever turning itself into sound. And we, for this brief moment, are the echo that makes it beautiful.